It was 2:45 a.m. when the phone rang. That kind of call that makes the night feel heavier than it already is. Jack Forge Harlan was still awake. Elbow deep in the guts of a 1978 Harley-Davidson, the smell of engine oil thick in the air. The phone vibrated across his workbench, spinning like an angry hornet, the caller ID glowing against the dim light of his garage. Mercy General Hospital Social Services. The name froze him mid-wrench. He hadn't heard from anyone in that area code for 3 years. Not since Tyrone's funeral. Not since he made a promise to a dying man, draped in the flag of a country that never gave him back what he'd sacrificed for it. When he answered, his voice was rough, tired but grounded in that quiet. Authority that comes from living too many. Lives in one lifetime. This is Forge. The woman on the line sounded young. Early 30s, maybe. Voice trembling just enough to betray what the job had done to her. Mr. Harlan, this is Elena Vargas from Mercy General Hospital in Nebraska. I'm calling about Maya Jenkins. That name hit him like a sledgehammer. The wrench slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. What happened? She's stable now? The woman said, hesitating like she was bracing herself for his reaction. But she's been admitted with injuries consistent with domestic violence. Her stepfather brought her in, claiming she fell downstairs. But the pattern of bruising doesn't match. Mr. Harlan, she gave us your name. She said her father told her that if anything ever happened, to find you. Forge didn't answer right away. His mind was already racing, calculating routes, fuel stops, and time. He could see Tyrone's face again, laughing in the desert heat. Dirt on his hands, blood on his shirt, the sound of gunfire echoing in the distance. That man had once thrown himself in front of an IED to save Forge's life. A decade later, Forge was being called to return the favor. Not for Tyrone, but for his daughter. I'm coming, he said finally. Don't let anyone take her out of that hospital. You hear me? Nobody. He didn't wait for a response. He hung up, tossed his rag aside, and grabbed his keys. The garage was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a wall clock. The hands pointed to 2:49 a.m., 14 hours. That's how long it would take if he rode straight, no stops longer than 10 minutes. He paused at the mirror, catching his reflection in the chrome of an unfinished bike. A scar traced the side of his face from temple to jaw, a gift from Kandahar. He was 48 now, skin weathered like leather, eyes hard as asphalt. There wasn't much left that scared him. But this did, because some promises aren't made to be broken. He pulled out his phone, opened the Thunderwolves MC group chat, and typed, Maya needs us, Tyrone's daughter. Nebraska, domestic situation. Wheels up at 5. This isn't optional. This is family. Replies came in within seconds. I'm in Storm. Count me there. Phantom. Rolling. Crow. For Tyrone. Inferno. By dawn, the roar of engines would echo through the Arizona desert. The first light of morning spread across the sky like a slow burn, red bleeding into gold, the air vibrating with the sound of 67 motorcycles revving in unison. Forge stood in front of them, the president's patch glinting faintly on his leather cut. Thunderwolves MC, loyal to the end. These weren't the kind of bikers movies warned you about. They were teachers, mechanics, nurses, veterans, people who carried more scars than stories. But when one of their own called, they didn't ask why. They just rode. Forge scanned the crowd. Storm, a mountain of a man who could crush a helmet with his bare hands. Crow, a 70-year-old widow who rode better than men half her age. Phantom, the quiet math teacher whose students thought he spent weekends tutoring, not tearing down highways at 90 miles an hour. Listen up, Forge said, his voice cutting clean through the rumble. We've got 420 miles ahead of us. That's Nebraska by late afternoon if we push hard. We ride smart, we ride tight, and we don't give anyone a reason to stop us. When we get there, we don't start a fight. We protect that girl, legally, peacefully, until she's safe. What if her stepfather shows up? Storm called out. He will, Forge said, eyes dark. And when he does, we'll be ready. But we're not here to make headlines. We're here to keep a promise. There was a pause. Then Crow raised her fist, voice gravelly but fierce. For Tyrone. The others echoed her, fists in the air, voices rising like thunder. The engines roared to life. And then, just like that, they were gone. A line of chrome and black leather cutting through the desert dawn. bound for Nebraska and a fight they hadn't chosen but couldn't ignore. The road stretched endless and straight, the kind of road where the horizon seemed to run forever. The rumble of engines formed a rhythm, not chaos, but unity. Forge led the pack, eyes locked ahead, wind tearing at his jacket. Every mile marker they passed was one step closer to a promise being kept, or broken. By mid-afternoon, the sun hung high and cruel. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt. They crossed into Kansas, refueled, and kept riding. At every stop, Forge's phone buzzed. Updates from Elena Vargas, the social worker. Maya was awake, scared. Her stepfather was trying to get her discharged. Forge's grip tightened on the throttle. By the time the hospital came into view, the sun was already sinking. Mercy General Hospital stood on the edge of town, sterile, pale, quiet. But that quiet shattered when 67 motorcycles turned into the parking lot like an invading army. The engines roared, rattling windows, sending nurses to the windows and security guards to their radios. Then, silence. Forge killed his engine and stepped off his bike. The others followed suit, standing in formation behind him. No shouting, no threats, just presence. A wall of loyalty and leather. He walked through the automatic doors alone, boots echoing against the tile floor. A nurse behind the counter froze mid-sentence, eyes darting to the panic button. "I'm here to see Maya Jenkins," Forge said softly, removing his sunglasses. "Elena Vargas should be expecting me." Elena appeared from down the hall, clipboard pressed to her chest. She was younger than he expected, with tired eyes that had seen too many broken families. "You brought quite a few people," she said quietly, glancing out the glass doors. "I brought family," Forge replied. "Where is she?" "4th floor. Room 412, but we need to talk first." They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, 2 uniformed officers stood outside Maya's room, hands on their belts. Forge's jaw tightened. Inside a small conference room, Elena laid it out: fractured wrist, 3 broken ribs, bruises that didn't come from a fall. "He's demanding her discharge," she said. "He has legal custody. Without solid evidence, the hospital can't hold her past tonight." Forge's eyes darkened. "You're telling me that bastard can just walk in here and take her?" "Yes," she said softly. "Unless we get an emergency order." "Then we'll get one." When Forge finally stepped into Maya's hospital room, the world seemed to go still. She looked smaller than he remembered, pale, fragile, eyes too old for 15. But those eyes, they were Tyrone's. "Uncle Forge," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "Yeah, kid. I promised your dad, remember?" Her voice broke as tears spilled down her face. "He killed my mom." "I know he did. Nobody believes me." Forge's blood ran cold. He didn't get the chance to respond. Elena appeared in the doorway, face pale. "He's here," she whispered. "And he's not alone." Downstairs, Officer Patrick Donovan entered like he owned the place. Crisp uniform, polished shoes, fake smile. 2 officers flanked him, and a lawyer followed behind. "Jack Harlan," Donovan said loudly, extending a hand he didn't mean. "Tyrone's old war buddy. Appreciate you checking on Maya, but this is family business." Forge's voice was calm, measured. "Maya asked for me. That makes it my business." "She's confused," Donovan said smoothly. "Traumatized?" "Kids say things they don't mean. I'm her guardian, and she's coming home with me tonight." "With 3 broken ribs?" Forge said, voice like gravel. The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Harlan, unless you have legal standing, you need to step aside." Forge took a step closer. "Funny thing, Maya's 15. That means her consent matters. Did anyone bother asking what she wants?" Donovan's smile cracked, just a little. "My daughter is traumatized." "She's not your daughter," Forge said. And for the first time, everyone in the lobby went silent. Behind the glass, 67 bikers stood like statues in the parking lot. And somewhere inside Forge's chest, the battle lines were drawn. The hospital lobby had fallen into a silence so sharp it almost hummed. The officers near the door shifted, their hands unconsciously brushing the holsters at their sides. Patrick Donovan's jaw flexed as his polished smile thinned into a straight line. He was the kind of man who thrived on control, who built his authority on posture, tone, and the shine of his badge. But right now, none of that mattered. Across from him stood Jack Forge Harlan, leather vest, scarred face, eyes cold as winter steel, and 67 bikers waiting quietly, just outside those glass doors. Donovan stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Mr. Harlan, I've been a cop for 15 years. You want to turn this into a scene? I'll have every one of your biker buddies arrested before they can start their engines." Forge didn't flinch. "You do what you have to, officer," he said evenly. "But if you're so sure you're in the right, why do you look nervous?" For a moment, the mask cracked. Donovan's eyes hardened. Then came that smooth cop smile again, carefully reassembled. "I'm taking my daughter home. Now move aside." But before Forge could answer, the glass doors slid open behind him, and the sound of boots filled the room. The figure who entered didn't wear leather or carry a gun. He carried a briefcase. Derek Bonds Fletcher had once been a Thunder. Wolf himself before trading his cut for a law degree. His suit was crisp, silver hair immaculate, but the look in his eyes still carried that same road-worn defiance. "Did somebody order a lawyer?" Bonds said, voice cutting clean through the tension. Donovan's lawyer turned, startled. "Who the hell are you?" "Derek Fletcher. I represent Mr. Harlan and Miss Jenkins." He dropped his briefcase onto the counter with a sharp click that echoed like a gavel strike. "And as of 20 minutes ago, I've filed a petition for emergency guardianship pending investigation into allegations of abuse." Donovan's expression froze mid-sentence. "You can't—" "I can," Bonds interrupted, his voice calm but edged like a blade. "Judge Patricia Herrera has already agreed to review the filing. Until that hearing, Miss Jenkins remains in protective custody here at Mercy General. Any attempt to remove her will be treated as obstruction." The lawyer grabbed the papers Bonds offered, scanning them with a trembling hand. Outside, through the glass, the thunder of engines started again. Not aggressive. Not violent, just deliberate. 67 motorcycles idling in quiet formation. The kind of sound that told everyone inside this wasn't over. Donovan's face darkened. "You think you can intimidate me with noise and paper? I've spent my life putting thugs like you behind bars." Bonds smiled faintly. "Then this should feel familiar, officer." Before Donovan could retort, camera flashes burst through the glass. Reporters had arrived, drawn by the commotion, the engines, and the rumor that a gang of bikers had stormed a hospital. Donovan's smile reappeared instantly, politician smooth. "This is a private matter," he told the cameras. "My daughter's being manipulated by outsiders. We'll handle it as a family." Forge stepped forward, voice steady. "You're right about one thing. It's about family. But real family doesn't break ribs and call it love." The lobby erupted. Shouts from reporters. Camera shutters, nurses whispering behind their hands. For a man who craved control, Donovan was suddenly drowning in exposure. Bonds leaned close to Forge, murmuring, "He's losing ground." "Let him talk. The more he says, the more rope he gives us." Forge didn't reply. He was already thinking ahead, Mike, about Maya upstairs, about the promise he'd made years ago beside her father's flag-draped coffin. Promises, Forge had learned, were like chains. You either carried them or they dragged you. By nightfall, Mercy General was transformed. The parking lot outside glowed beneath streetlights and headlamps. The Thunderwolves had set up camp, folding chairs, coolers, thermoses of coffee. Some leaned against their bikes in silence. Others kept watch in shifts. There was no yelling, no chaos. Just presence. Inside, Bonds had taken over a corner of the hospital cafeteria. His papers spread like battle plans. Forge sat opposite him, a cup of bad coffee cooling in his hands. "Donovan's not stupid," Bonds said, flipping through printouts. "He's already filed a counterclaim. Claims you're an unfit guardian, violent, with a record." "I don't have a record," Forge said. "You do now," Bonds replied grimly. "A bar fight from 5 years ago. Disorderly conduct, dropped charges, but it's there. He'll use it." Forge's jaw tightened. "That was for defending Crow. Some drunk put his hands on her. I didn't let it slide." "Yeah, well, he's spinning it differently. And he's calling the club a criminal organization." Forge exhaled slowly, eyes flicking toward the window. "He's scared. Scared men get sloppy." Bonds nodded. "Then we make him sloppier. I'm pulling his financials. Let's see what else he's hiding." Across the cafeteria, the TV flickered silently. A local news anchor reading headlines beneath the words, Biker gang storms Nebraska hospital. Forge. Didn't need the sound to know what they were saying. He could feel it in the looks from hospital staff, some frightened, some curious, a few quietly grateful. At 11:47 p.m., Phantom, the math teacher turned digital bloodhound, walked in with his laptop. Got something, he said quietly. Donovan's wife, Maya's mom, died 10 months ago. Official report says single vehicle accident, clear weather, straight road. No skid marks. Forge's gaze sharpened. You think it was staged? Phantom hesitated. Can't prove it yet, but it doesn't smell right. Bonds looked up from his notes. We'll find out. Get me the report, the autopsy, everything. Forge leaned back, eyes distant. He killed her, he said quietly. And now he's trying to do the same to the kid. Bonds didn't argue. He didn't have to. By morning, the hospital buzzed with rumors. Some called the bikers heroes. Others called them a cult. But everyone agreed on one thing. They weren't leaving. When Forge walked through the halls, nurses nodded. Patients whispered thank yous. Even the security guards, who'd been on edge the night before, started treating them less like intruders and more like guardians. At 9:15 a.m., Elena Vargas appeared with a manila folder clutched to her chest. Her eyes darted around before she slid into the cafeteria booth across from Forge and Bonds. If anyone asks, "You didn't get this from me?" she whispered. Inside the folder were hospital records, and not Maya's, but her mother's. Fractured fingers, bruised ribs, concussions spread across 3 years. Each report from a different hospital, each marked accidental injury. She was running, Elena said softly, trying to get help without leaving a paper trail. Forge's jaw locked, and nobody saw it. She was careful. He was more careful, Elena said, her voice cracking. The system doesn't catch people who know how to hide behind it. Bonds photographed everything. This changes everything, he said. It's a pattern of abuse spanning years. We can argue imminent danger. Donovan sealed Maya's medical records, Elena added. Claimed it was for privacy. Of course he did, Bonds muttered. Control the evidence, control the story. Forge's voice dropped low. Not anymore. Outside, rain began to fall, a thin drizzle that turned the asphalt into a mirror. The bikers stood beneath it anyway, jackets slick, eyes steady. They didn't need words. Their presence said everything. She's not alone anymore. Inside, the battle shifted from the street to the courtroom. Bonds filed emergency motions, calling in favors from judges and clerks he'd once gone to war against in courtrooms. Phantom sent encrypted files to news outlets. Elena wrote a sworn affidavit. By evening, word came down, the judge had agreed to an emergency. Hearing, first thing in the morning. Tomorrow decides everything, Bonds said quietly. If we lose, Donovan takes her home. Forge nodded. Then we don't lose. He didn't sleep that night. None of them did. The next morning dawned gray and heavy. Mercy General's conference room had been cleared for the hearing. A laptop sat at the center of a long table, camera facing the room. On screen, Judge Patricia Herrera adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. Forge sat beside Bonds, wearing a borrowed shirt and a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Across from them, Donovan sat in uniform, every metal polished, his lawyer beside him with a stack of papers as thick as a Bible. Let's begin, the judge said. This hearing concerns the temporary guardianship of Maya Jenkins, age 15. Bonds presented the evidence, medical reports, bruising patterns, the mother's history, financial records showing Donovan's offshore accounts. Every piece landed like a blow. But Kessler, Donovan's lawyer, was ready for every one of them, deflecting, reframing, discrediting. Officer Donovan is a decorated member of law enforcement, Kessler said smoothly. He's been raising Maya alone since her mother's tragic accident. This is nothing more than an emotional misunderstanding exploited by outsiders. Donovan nodded solemnly, eyes full of rehearsed grief. She's been through so much. I've tried my best. She's angry, confused, and then this man shows up in a biker with a violent past and fills her head with lies. Forge's knuckles went white under the table, but he stayed silent. Bonds had warned him. Emotion loses cases. The hearing dragged on for hours. Back and forth like a chess match played with knives. The judge listened, expression cold and unreadable. Then finally she said, I'd like to hear from Maya herself. Donovan's composure cracked for the first time. "Your Honor, my daughter is traumatized." "She's awake," came a voice from the back. Elena Vargas stood by the door, face pale but resolute. "And she wants to speak." The judge nodded. "Bring her in." A minute later, the door opened, and the room fell silent. Maya looked smaller than before, her wrist still in a cast, ribs wrapped beneath her hospital gown. But her eyes, they weren't frightened anymore. They were focused, determined. "Hello, Maya," the judge said gently. "You don't have to do this." "I want to," Maya said, her voice soft but clear. She turned to Donovan, the man who'd destroyed her family, her peace, her trust in safety. "You killed my mom," she said. The room froze. Kessler jumped to his feet, shouting objections. The judge overruled him. Maya continued, voice trembling but steady. "She found something. I don't know what, but she said she was going to the police. The night before she died, you were in the garage for hours. The next day, her brakes failed. You said it was an accident, but I know it wasn't." Donovan's face hardened. "Sweetheart, you're confused." "I'm not your sweetheart," she said, louder now. "I'm your evidence." From her pocket, she pulled out a small USB drive. "Mom gave me this 3 days before she died. Told me not to look unless something happened to her. It's bank records. Proof you were stealing from the evidence locker and selling it." For a moment's silence. Then chaos. Donovan lunged, shouting that she was lying. But 2 officers grabbed his arms before he reached her. The judge's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Officer Donovan, you are ordered to remain seated pending investigation." Her gavel came down hard. "Emergency custody granted to Mr. Harlan. Further proceedings to follow. Court adjourned." Donovan's voice was venom as he glared across the room. "This isn't over." Forge stood slowly, his eyes calm. "Yeah," he said. "It is." The echo of the judge's gavel seemed to hang in the air long, after the laptop screen went dark. The hospital conference room was still buzzing with whispers, reporters murmuring, nurses exhaling, even the 2 officers who'd restrained Donovan, exchanging glances that said more than any words could. Forge sat back in his chair, the adrenaline slowly bleeding out of his body. Across the table, Bonds was already gathering his documents with the same calm efficiency he always had, like winning a legal war was just another day at the office. Donovan, though, wasn't calm. His uniform was wrinkled now, his eyes wild and hollow. For years, he'd lived off control. The neatness of his uniform, the authority of his badge, the fear it brought others. But now, sitting handcuffed in the corner as 2 internal affairs officers entered to escort him away, he looked small, human, caught. He turned his head as they led him past Forge and hissed under his breath, "You think this ends with a piece of paper? You can't protect her forever." Forge didn't even look up. "I only need to protect her long enough for her to learn how to protect herself," he said. The door shut behind them, and with it, the last echo of Donovan's false authority. Outside, the afternoon sun had burned through the morning clouds, turning the wet pavement into gold. When Maya was wheeled out into the lobby, her small backpack slung over one shoulder, a nurse at her side, every person in that building stopped to watch. She wasn't the same scared girl who'd arrived 2 days ago. Her face still carried the bruises. But beneath them was something new, defiance, strength. Forge met her halfway across the lobby. She smiled faintly. "So, what happens now?" "Now?" he said, glancing toward the glass doors, where the faint rumble of engines had started again. "Now we go home." The hospital's front doors slid open and sunlight spilled in like redemption. The sound hit first, a deep, rolling thunder that vibrated in the chest more than the ears. 67 motorcycles lined the driveway in perfect formation, chrome gleaming, leather shining black against the pale sky. Not one engine idled without purpose. Each machine stood like a soldier waiting for a command. Patients in wheelchairs had gathered by the windows. Nurses leaned out from upper floors. Reporters lifted cameras. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Crow stepped forward. First, the 70-year-old grandmother in a leather cut that read, "Thunderwolves MC." In her hands, she carried a small black jacket. The back patch wasn't like the others. It showed a wolf curled protectively around a pup, with a single-stitched phrase, "Family above all." Crow smiled as she handed it to Maya. Every wolf needs a pack, she said softly. And this one's yours. Maya looked at the jacket, her lip trembling. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to, Storm said, stepping forward from the line, towering. Broad-shouldered, his voice a gentle rumble. You've already said it just by surviving. Forge stood a few feet away, letting her have that moment. The flash of cameras caught his profile, the scar, the steady eyes, the calm posture of a man who'd spent his life keeping his word no matter what it cost. He thought about Tyrone, about the sand and smoke of Kandahar, about that last day, the smell of cordite in the air, and Tyrone grabbing his vest, whispering through blood and dust, "If I don't make it, watch out for my little girl." He had kept that promise. When Maya slipped into the jacket, something shifted in the air. The crowd of bikers, rough and quiet, gave her a small nod of respect. Not pity, not sympathy, but acceptance. "Ready to ride?" Forge asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." He handed her a helmet, matte black, lightweight, with a white Thunderwolf decal on the side. She slipped it on, still uncertain but smiling through tears. Forge climbed onto his Harley, fired the ignition, and held out his hand. Maya climbed on behind him, careful with her cast, wrapping her good arm around his waist. The roar that followed wasn't violence. It was release. 67 engines came to life at once, a sound so massive and alive it seemed to shake the ground itself. The formation split perfectly, rows aligning into two columns, leaving the center path open for Forge and Maya. As he rolled forward, the bikers closed in behind them, reforming like a wall of chrome and thunder. Inside the hospital, the nurses clapped. Outside, reporters stepped back, cameras flashing, lenses reflecting sunlight off the sea of motorcycles. The convoy rolled out slow at first, a deliberate, powerful procession. The people on the sidewalk stopped to stare. Drivers pulled over and filmed with their phones. Someone in the crowd shouted, "God bless you!" Another simply whispered, "Look at them." And somewhere between the roar of engines and the rhythm of tires against asphalt, the story became something bigger than all of them. A story that would travel across newsrooms, social media feeds, and whispered conversations around kitchen tables. 97 bikers stormed a hospital to protect one black girl from her stepfather. They didn't know how it ended yet, but they knew what it meant. The first few miles passed in silence. The horizon stretched wide and empty ahead, and for the first time in months, maybe years, Maya's world felt open. The wind whipped past her face, and the sound of engines drowned out every ugly word. Every bruise, every night she'd cried and no one had listened. Forge kept the throttle steady, his eyes fixed ahead. He didn't look back often, but when he did, he saw her reflection in the mirror. The small black helmet. The faint tilt of her head as she watched the sun sink behind them. She looked like she was breathing again. They crossed out of Nebraska by nightfall. By the time the convoy hit the open highways of Kansas, the air was cooler, cleaner. Phantom rode tail as always, keeping the formation tight. Storm and Crow flanked Forge and Maya. At one gas stop, while the others refueled, Maya stood beside Forge's bike, staring at the horizon. "What happens to him now?" she asked quietly. "Donovan?" Forge said. "He'll face charges. Bonds has enough evidence to bury him. Might not be quick, might not even be easy, but it'll happen." Maya nodded slowly. "He always said nobody would believe me, that he could make anything disappear." Forge looked down at her. "He believed that because people like him usually can, until someone decides they can't." She smiled faintly. "You decided." "I just kept a promise," he said. "You did the hard part. You told the truth." They didn't talk for a while after that. The others began rolling out again, and Forge tapped her shoulder. "Time to move!" Back on the highway, night wrapped around them like a blanket. The stars came out one by one, the kind of clean, hard stars you only see far from cities. Maya leaned her head slightly against Forge's back, not from exhaustion, but from peace. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the dark. It was near midnight when they crossed into Arizona. The familiar smell of dust and gasoline filled the air. Forge's garage sat at the end of a long stretch of empty road, lit only by a single bulb over the door. When they pulled in, the other riders parked in a semicircle, headlights illuminating the old metal sign that read Harlan Customs. Forge killed the engine and helped Maya down. The desert was quiet except for the ticking of cooling engines. Above them, the stars stretched like an endless ocean. "This place is yours now, too," Forge said softly. "Guest room's in the back. Nobody will bother you here." She looked up at him. The man her father had trusted. The man who'd just turned the world upside down to keep her safe. "What about you?" she asked. He smiled, small and tired. "Me? I'll be fine. I got what I came for." Maya frowned. "You promised my dad you'd protect me. But what about you? Who protects you?" Forge didn't answer at first. He just looked out toward the desert, where the faint glow of the other bikers' taillights was disappearing into the dark. Then he said quietly, "I've got a pack too." Maya nodded slowly, understanding more than she could say. Inside the garage, the walls were lined with photographs, black and white, shots of Forge and Tyrone in uniform, standing beside Humvees and dust storms, grinning through the kind of exhaustion only soldiers understand. Beneath them were pictures of the Thunderwolves through the years, road trips, weddings, funerals. Every face in those frames told a story of someone who'd fallen and been picked up again. Maya paused in front of one picture. Tyrone, young and alive, one arm thrown around Forge's shoulders. "He looks like me," she said softly. Forge smiled faintly. "He'd say you look stronger." Days turned into weeks. The story exploded across national news. Bikers save girl from abusive cop stepfather became a headline that refused to fade. News outlets tried to spin it into every narrative they could. Vigilante justice, Brotherhood corruption, but to the people who were there, it was simpler. It was about one promise kept. Patrick Donovan was formally charged with multiple counts: child abuse, evidence tampering, embezzlement. The USB drive had been the final nail. His bail was denied. Internal Affairs called it the most disgraceful case in the department's history. Through it all, Forge stayed silent. No interviews, no press. Just the garage, the hum of engines, and the occasional rumble of the Thunder Wolves, dropping by with supplies or to check on Maya. She healed slowly, physically first, emotionally later. Therapy sessions, school enrollment under a new name, quiet dinners with Forge that felt almost normal. She started laughing again. Not loud, not often, but enough. Sometimes at night, Forge would hear the faint creak of her door and find her sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. "You can't sleep either?" she'd ask. "Never could," he'd reply, pouring them both a cup of coffee, hers mostly milk. They'd sit in silence for a while before she'd finally say, "I think he's still out there." Forge would shake his head. "No, he's not." But deep down, he knew that for people like her, survivors, the monsters never fully disappeared. They just stopped being powerful. Months later, on a warm Arizona evening, the Thunderwolves gathered again. Not for war this time, but for something better. The old Harley Forge had been fixing that night the call came in was finally finished, polished, alive. He called it Tyrone's Promise. Maya helped him attach the final piece, a small silver plate on the side, engraved with 7 words. "Family isn't blood. It's loyalty and choice." She looked at it for a long moment. "You think Dad would have liked it?" Forge smiled. "He would have said it's too shiny." She laughed, really laughed, and for a moment, the sound filled the whole garage. As the sun dipped below the desert horizon, the Thunderwolves rolled out one by one, engines rumbling into the evening. Forge stood by the doorway watching them disappear into streaks of fading light. Maya stepped beside him, leather jacket slung over her shoulder. "Where are they going?" He looked down the road, smiling faintly. "Anywhere they're needed." That night, long after the house was quiet, Maya sat at the window of her room. The desert wind was warm, carrying the faint smell of dust and oil. She opened her laptop and typed something into a blank document. Just a few words, but enough to mean everything. To the 97 bikers who showed up when I thought no one would. "You didn't just save me. You reminded me that family can be chosen." She hit save and closed it. Her reflection faint in the screen. Stronger now, clearer. Outside, under the vast Arizona sky, a single motorcycle engine started. Forge probably heading out for a midnight ride. The sound faded into the distance until all that remained was the quiet hum of the desert and the whisper of wind through open windows. For the first time in her life, Maya felt safe enough to sleep. The story spread far beyond Nebraska. Documentaries were made. Podcasts told it with reverence. To some, it was about justice. To others, redemption. But to the Thunderwolves, it would always just be about one thing, a promise. And somewhere on a long, lonely stretch of Arizona highway, the leader of that pack rode beneath a sky full of stars, the ghost of an old friend riding beside him, the voice of a girl laughing somewhere behind him in memory. Because in the end, the truth wasn't in the headlines or the courtrooms. It was in the roar of the engines, the loyalty of outcasts, and the simple fact that sometimes, even in the darkest places, good people show up, not because they have to, but because they promised they would, and that was the ending no one expected.